For today's program, we'll have a welcome address by Mr. Santosh T. Verghese, General Secretary of KEAs.
Respected Chair of the Seminar Program, Professor S. Hari Kumar, Senior Vice President of Kerala Economic Association, Chief Guest of the Day, and the keynote address will be delivered by Professor Vishwajit Thar. The fellow panelists, Professor K.N. Harilal, respected President of KEA, Professor C. Veeramani, respected Director of Center for Development Studies, Thiruvananthapuram, and Sri C. Balagopal, Director of KSIDC, Government of Kerala, office bearers of KEA, executive members of KEA, other members, and fellow participants of this seminar program. As we all know, on the 2nd of April 2025, US President Donald Trump has announced retaliatory tariffs on countries across the board. We all know that that measure has been a part of the larger campaign initiated by Trump with the slogan that he is going to make America great again, the MAGA program. Immediately after that, the leading financial magazine, The Economist, published from London, immediately wrote the opinion piece that these measures are actually leading to make China great again by America. And we all know that this is going to have a big realignment on the economic interests, the geopolitical influences, eventually leading to an overhaul of the global economic order. So it is in this context, Kerala Economic Association has decided to conduct a national level seminar to discuss the various aspects of the Trumpian tariff policy, not only upon India, but upon the various economies over the world. And for this seminar, and also Kerala Economic Association is taking pride in conducting such a national level seminar on a very important topic as a forerunner, not only in Kerala, across many of the professional bodies in India. We have none other than Professor Vishwajit Thar, the former distinguished professor, Council of Social Development, and formerly professor at Center for Economic Studies and Planning, Jawaharlal Nehru University. And he has written a very important opinion piece within 10 days, that is on April 12th, in Financial Express, that this program will sow seeds of recession in the global economy by citing the example of what happened to Argentina during the beginning of the 20th century. We know that during the initial decades, Argentina grew in a very remarkable manner. But when it imposed these tariffs, Argentina faded away into the growth oblivion. And Thar was narrating about the consequences on the basis of that experience. On behalf of Kerala Economic Association, I extend you, sir, a hearty welcome to this academic discourse. Then we have a panel of eminent economists. Our own Professor K.N. Harilal, President KEA, and also the chairman of the 7th State Finance Commission. Sir also has written a very important article in Economic and Political Weekly, dated May 31st, where he argued that this is going to have a big realignment, a reset, the familiar term normally Harilal sir use, leading to a global reset where India has to focus upon a radically different position where we have to say goodbye to the fiscal conservatism and need to focus upon an active role for the government to deal with the challenges and to take benefits out of the situation. It's a completely different opinion. And it's a very important thought-provoking article because of this conclusion. So we are very proud about that article, and Professor Harilal sir, on behalf of KEA, it's a formal one. I extend you, sir, a hearty welcome to this academic discourse. Then we have Professor C. Veeramani, another distinguished economist, an expert in international trade and policy, has published a number of articles in leading journals of our country on the issues connected with the international trade and policy. And he is also the director of Center for Development Studies and always a friend of Kerala Economic Association. Whenever KEA has any help that we need from Center for Development Studies, he's in the forefront. He extends all that facilities for the activities of KEA. On behalf of KEA, I extend you, sir, a hearty welcome to this academic program. Then we have Sri C. Balagopal, Director KSIDC of Government of Kerala. He's actually joining with the program in online mode. On behalf of KEA, I extend you, sir, a hearty welcome to this seminar program. Then we have Professor Godwin S.K., Treasurer of KEA, who is offering the vote of thanks. On sake of formality, I extend you, Godwin, a hearty welcome to this program. Then we have the office bearers of KEA, Dr. Rejuna, then Nirmal Kumar, other executive members of KEA, all are participating physically in this program. I extend all the fellow executive members of the association a hearty welcome to this program. Then we have Dr. Professor Jenny, the director in charge of Gulati Institute of Finance and Taxation, and the registrar, Dr. A. Saraf. Both are participating in this program. And without the support of GIFT, Gulati Institute of Finance and Taxation, for the last 3 years, I am very confident that without the support and help of Gulati Institute of Finance and Taxation, the programs of Kerala Economic Association would not have become a success. On behalf of KE, I take this opportunity to extend a hearty welcome to Professor Jenny and Dr. A. Saraf for the success of this program. And the fellow participants who are assembled here, and a number of participants are joining with us in the online mode. I think more than 60 participants are at the Zoom platform. On behalf of Kerala Economic Association, I extend all a hearty welcome and congratulate you all, and thankful also to you all for making this program a success. With these words, I conclude. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Professor Bishwajit Athar, Dr. K.N. Harilal, Professor Veeramani, Sri C. Balagopal, Registrar of GIFT, Saraf, my distinguished colleagues, dear friends, both in online and offline mode. Today we have, as Santosh has mentioned, we have assembled here to identify the long-term and short-term policy of immediate and long-term policy options as a result of the imposition of tariff by Trump. See, if you look at some of the observations in front of us, in some of the publications, we can see that the roughly 200 countries or something like that, 98 are subjected to basic reciprocal tariff by 10%. Then another 67, 15%. Then another 10, 18 to 20%. And only 17 are with 20% range. If you look at the case of India, Brazil, we can find that we have charged with 25% tariff, and a penalty later or somewhere in the end of this month, another 25% may come. If we take the case of Switzerland, there also we can find that it is only 39%. So what we infer from it is that uh, the Trump administration is trying to push a differential type of tariff against many different countries. What we have to consider is that this policy shift, basically it is in a situation where we had we were having the free and fair trade agreement, where free flow of goods and services with a minimum tariff is to be practiced. Against this scenario, Trump is bringing this. There are many objectives behind it. Even though we say that it is against India, he charges is just because of we purchase oil from Russia, then the so-called defense equipments and like that. That is one argument. Apart from that, we know that political reasons also there. Then why Brazil? Another question is that is purely political. No economic arguments are put forward in the case of Brazil also. So when we look at this scenario, again, we can find that Trump administration has given a very high tax cut to corporates. So this has to be matched to be financed. Or to finance this revenue, he believes that the collection from import duties could be used to finance this revenue loss. That is one. Another point that we can think is that always US has a capitalist hegemony on other countries. Trump wanted to impose this again and again on the other. Then there are many other forces that compels Trump so that they can have certain advantages when some bilateral discussions takes place. So this is a scenario of we can say that this may be some of the objectives behind this tariff policy put forward by Trump. Then again, we look at the trade relation between India and USA. There we can find that the statistics for 24-25 shows that it is approximately $41.18 billion, and which is actually increasing over time. So he wanted to narrow this down. For that purpose, if he imposes a tariff on imports from India, then possibly this gap could be minimized or could be reduced. That another argument that we can find at that. Then again we look at that by increasing the tariff on India, that the India's capital account deficit will be adversely affect. That is also another argument. Possibly Vishwadit and Professor Harilal may be going in detail with this. Then is there any way forward? There are many solutions suggested by many people. However, the only possibility that we can find, or reasonably or logically that we can find, is that better is to have, if we lose our competitive edge in trade with the USA, then we should try to have a diversified trade with other countries, possibly explore what is the trade relation with UK, European Union, etc. So then again, there's a possibility of the rupee depreciation, etc. They are influencing this CAD and other things. That is a different issue is there. Then some other writers also say that as a result of the formation of BRICS and the trade balances with the US, the efficiency of dollar is slowly coming down. So a type of de-dollarization is also likely to come up. And that will also may compel USA to take a decision like this. We have to understand one point that the tariff that is imposed by Trump is only an executive order. He can revise it at any time, and also say that he can revise and he can withdraw just like he has imposed. So anyway, if we continue like this, then definitely it will have trade with 25% itself. We have trade repercussions. We will have our CAD will widen. Then it will have negative impact on our GDP growth rate. Already the 6.5% GDP growth estimated is a doubtful thing. Then again, if this happen, again this will come down in future periods. So like that, there are many issues. Then how this is going to affect agriculture, that is also another problem affecting US, because they are very much interested in having a negotiation with India for importing the agriculture products, especially milk. Many of the newspapers and articles have read. Then soybean, like that, many issues which India will not allow that. So as the Trump administration is concerned, to negotiate in India on this ground, it is a little bit difficult. That may be the possible situation. Okay. So that may be the reason why this kind of immediate repercussion has come just after the Trump administration. So this, with this few observation, let me wind up my address, and I will pass it to our esteemed guest, Professor Bishudit Thar. Before he starts his presentation, I invite Dr. Godwin to have to present a brief biodata of.
Oh, it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'll just,
Okay.
one
Then.
more point I'll add,
Okay.
because he gave a beautiful introduction of Professor Mishadhar. Of course, he is a friend of CDS, and he visits CDS very frequently. For most of our seminars he used to come. And also Cochin University and other places he makes visits. And he was in the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, and he was chief of the WTO center there before he joined JNU. And then he was also helping Commerce Ministry, and he used to participate in India's negotiations in the WTO. And of course, he has been writing and teaching international economics, particularly related to international trade policy. So, in fact, we are very happy to have got him here. Thank you, sir, for coming. And it's now up to you, sir.
Thank you very much. And the chair of today's session, my dear friend Harilal, Viramani, and all the office bearers of the Kerala Economic Association. I can't thank you enough for inviting me to share my thoughts on this extremely burning issue. Now, the problem for me always is that whenever when I was in JNU, I used to take 2-hour lectures, and and it was, even after 2 hours I used to feel dissatisfied, because I thought I couldn't finish everything. So please let me know when you feel bored, and give me an indication. I'll stop there and try to wind up what I have to say as soon as possible. Yeah, no. No, yeah, no, I'll do that. Yeah. No, so when Harilal asked me to participate in today's, sort of discussion meeting, I actually asked him to suggest what I should speak on, because my head has got all cluttered, because I'm writing on so many different aspects that so I sought his suggestion. and he suggested that I should speak on the impact on the global trading system and what implications it has on India. So I'll try and focus more on what the kind of damage Trump is causing to the the global trading system, the multilateral trading system that has been with us, and what are the and what I think is uh, the shape of things to come. Of course, we all know that the multilateral trading system was far from being perfect, but as long as we had it in some shape, and this was not before Trump, it was actually Obama who started dismantling the multilateral trading system. Uh, Poor Trump is being blamed for a lot of things, but I don't blame him for starting to dismantle the WTO. He took it forward from Obama. Um, but as long as the WTO was there in some shape, we were trying to put it back and to ensure that it functions according to the principles that had been laid out by the founders of, or the founders of the multilateral system. And they had, I'm going to talk about it in later, that it does, the founders of the multilateral trading system did not see trade as an end in itself. They saw trade as a means to the end, and the means was, of course, economic development and balanced development for the betterment of the the lesser developed countries. Now that was the essence of multilateralism, and of course trade multilateralism is talks about this. But in general, multilateralism is we all have argued that multilateralism is not for the rich and the powerful. It's for those who are marginalized. Because the rich and the powerful can, in any case, manipulate the global economy and polity, and they have been doing that. But for the smaller countries, and we have huge stakes, and that's why when I was also part of the Indian negotiating team, the WTO, used to keep telling my friends that we have to put our best efforts, because this is the only solution or the only institution that can provide solutions to our problems. So you can't actually talk in terms of too many of these free trade agreements and all, because I think free trade agreements actually can damage the multilateral trading. So which my friend Veeramani is a trade economist, will always, so we surely agree that is the first best. We always seen as the first best terms of outcomes. So, so now we are in a Trumpian world, as they say. Huh? And what is this Trumpian world, where the US has actually asserted itself as a global hegemon, and of course we don't need any more evidence. See, people who have been of a particular sort of orientation. We have always characterized US as a global hegemon and provided various evidence. But now, Trump is actually announcing that he is exercising the US hegemony every day. So my job early in the morning is to open my phone and to see what's happening in CNN and BBC and what Trump has done, because every day he's doing something or the other, and he's a shifting goalpost. So he's doing this. So and he's a global hegemon, which is actually seeking tribute from the poorer countries to make itself great again. So you said MAGA. So how is it doing this? By seeking tribute, and that's what a global hegemon does. So, for instance, some of the poorest countries like Laos, for instance, has 40% tariffs. So, and many of these countries who had actually initially been imposed very high tariffs, because they had large trade deficit vis-a-vis US, the reason was that they couldn't buy from a high-cost economy, and they've been penalized for doing that. So these countries now will have to pay a very high entry entry price, high entry price for an entry ticket to the US market. Otherwise, you're locked out. So if you're new in my market, then you have to pay this heavy price. And Trump has actually said it in so many words. Now, it's also important to recognize, again, in the same vein, that we have been actually pushed into the age of imperialism, as I think Rosa Luxemburg really saw it more than a decade back, and is actually operating the blatant manner where it's actually using the periphery to solve its own problems. The underconsumption problem that capitalism actually faces, the crisis of capitalism, and to overcome this, as Luxemburg actually told us, that capitalism needs to find new markets and sources of raw materials outside its existing boundaries. Now, is exactly this what is happening, and and she actually said that this leads to the expansion of capitalist economies into non-capitalist regions, resulting in imperialism. So, with due apologies to Harry Magdoff, poor man, sort of exercised very hard to prove that we're in the age of imperialism then. But now, in the 21st century, the first quarter of the 21st century, we are really in a world of imperialism. Now, again, by way of just some introduction, I'm just trying to point out that these indiscriminate use of tariffs to meet both economic and non-economic goals, what he is doing, is of course inherently flawed. And this more fundamentally, these measures signal a broader abandonment of reciprocity and negotiated rules favoring multilateralism. This is what I was saying at the beginning, that abandonment of multilateralism, replacing this by unilateralism or use of coercive bargaining. So, Trump had always been saying that there are the whole long line of leaders of different countries who are waiting there in front of his office and asking him, where do I sign? So that is the kind of a thing that he's is priding himself with. And so the result is sort of systemic fragmentation of the MFN principle, and sort of departure from that the core principle of non-discrimination that WTO is talking about, and of course setting extremely dangerous precedents. And if you look at the larger, again, the even broader picture, this phase, I think, effectively marks the end of the post-war discourse on development. Because what Trump is saying is that, I don't believe in, sort of the global economy working in a manner to develop the underdeveloped regions. So, he's actually walking out of multilateral institutions, all these institutions that are supposed to be providing public goods, and for the bridging the gap between the rich and the poor, and trying to find just solutions. So that is being abandoned. So now the next thing is going to be, I think, the death knell for this the Sustainable Development Goals. It hasn't actually happened, but it should happen very soon. The trajectory on which we are, and that would be the final nail in the coffin, that we don't talk about, the global community stops talking about, these development objectives. So having given this broader kind of picture, let me come to the specifics. And here I would, sort of get into a little more granular and share with you what is actually been happening since January, almost, well, it's exactly 7 months since all this started happening. On 21st of January, Trump entered the Oval Office for the second term and announced that he would redraw the terms of US's global economic engagement, uh, and, um, and in a manner that no other head of state had done since the post-war. And this was his America First trade policy. And I think no, students who are interested in these issues, international economic issues, you must look at the document carefully. And it's an amazing piece of document, the way it actually spells out in an sort of unrestrained manner how he's going to be exploiting the global order. Now, this was his entire policy of aggressive unilateralism, and uh, and it was a kernel that was developed. The kernel was developed in this first term because it wasn't as extensive. It was only done partially. He had gone after China, to India and some other countries in limited extent in certain sectors where tariffs were used, but. Recording. Okay. Yeah. Can't hear me. I thought I was loud enough, Yeah. No. And so the America First trade policy took U.S. multilateralism, which was, of course, visible even during the multilateral trading system operation, because in many areas, U.S. actually refused to let its unilateral, the powers which it derived from its own trade act, various trade acts, especially this Trade Act of 1988, which was actually formulated during the Uruguay negotiations in the run-up to the WTO. And there are several pretty, I would say, nefarious provisions there. And one of them is, of course, the Section 301, when Special 301 is used against countries on their intellectual property, what US thinks is intellectual property violations. And US never gave that up, sort of investigating countries for the intellectual property laws. Till today, they're actually naming and shaming countries, and that's how the US does. And it was very difficult for the countries. There was a dispute in the WTO on the 301 issue, but India was a party to that dispute, but we couldn't actually get it over. Now, Trump's America First trade policy has three main strands. The first is that the trade policy is a critical component to national security, which is to be used as an instrument for reducing India's dependence on other countries, to meet the country's key security needs, establishing a robust and reinvigorated trade policy that promotes investment, productivity, and enhances US's industrial and technological advantages, defends economic and national security, and above all, benefits American workers, manufacturers, farmers, ranchers, entrepreneurs, and businesses. Now, this is the critical part. He has a trade policy which is only for the benefit of his own constituencies and nothing else. And I'll talk about this and the larger implications also in the context of I can't really understand why we started engaging in a bilateral trade agreement negotiations when this was the objective. He's not talking about even for the sake of a public discourse, because we know that many of these FTAs that advanced countries have negotiated with developing countries have been one-sided. Yeah, but to begin with, they never say that it's going to be one-sided. They always said it's win-win. But at the end of the day, when we open all the provisions and see how it has worked, it has actually not worked in our favor. We know that. But Trump has not made no a secret of it. He started with this premise that is going to be only for gains only for the US. And of course, this of course was seen in the past, a century back, when another Republican president, Herbert Hoover, he undertook a similar kind of trade policy and an extremely protectionist trade policy. And the outcome of that was, of course, one of the reasons for this was, of course, the Great Depression. And of course, there's a lot of research that is still going on to understand what impact Hoover's policies had on the depression. I'm sure after Trump has done this, I think many of us who are interested in this issue will look back and see how these two things are similar and look at the outcomes on a comparative scale. A second, of course, component, of course, all these are related, is that is trying to address what he calls unfair and unbalanced trade that US faces, the trade deficits that US faces. And he entrusted his the U.S. Trade Administration, the U.S. Trade Representative, who's the chief negotiator, trade negotiator, and the Secretary of Commerce, and the U.S. Treasury, the task of investigating the causes of U.S.'s large and persistent annual trade deficits in goods, as well as economic and national security implications that risks resulting from such deficits, and recommend appropriate measures which such as a global supplemental tariff or other policies to remedy such deficits. So this is what we are seeing in terms of the reciprocal tariffs. And finally, I think, if you all thought that tariffs is the only thing that he's going to do, he's going to go even further, because the final leg on this U.S. The America First trade policy is action against countries that Trump thinks are manipulating the currencies. So currency manipulation is the third leg of this policy. Now, this issue has received particular attention as the US president has desired appropriate measures to be taken to counter currency manipulation or misalignment, preventing effective balance of payments adjustments, or that provides trading partners with unfair competitive advantage in international trade. So he said it in so many words. So the U.S. Administration has not raised this issue yet, but there is an interesting paper which was produced by Stephen Miran. He's actually the chief of US's Council of Economic Advisors, advising the president. And Miran's paper came, I think, on around the middle of November, 15th of November, if I'm not mistaken. And if you look at Miran's paper and you see what Trump is doing, you find that the blueprint is actually coming from that paper. And the first thing Miran points there in that paper is currency manipulation. Of course, investigating currency manipulations and taking remedial measures is more difficult. So Trump has actually done what Trump has done is plucked the low-hanging fruit, and this is tariffs. So he's trying to address the trade imbalances through the use of tariffs. And of course, he's always said, and in his campaign trail, when he was campaigning for presidentship, he said that tariff is my favorite word. It's quite amazing, actually. He said this, and again after he met Putin, and there was an interview done by Fox News. It's quite amazing. I think all of you should actually hear Trump say what he says. Again, he said this, that he says, I'm using trade policy to get all the bigger political objectives achieved. And he says, I've ended 6 wars, all by using trade policy. I've told by all these countries, you do this, otherwise I'm going to do something on trade. I'm going to be imposing penalties on you. And this is it. So again, he says, you all know, Trump, the tariffs is my favorite word. I'm using it to achieve all the objectives. Now, now on this implementation of his trade policy, like I said, now it's all on tariffs. So um, uh, the first thing that Trump did was he asked his USTR, said that he's the chief trade negotiator, to review the existing trade agreements and sectoral trade agreements and recommend any revisions that may be necessary or appropriate to achieve or maintain the general level of reciprocal and mutually advantageous concessions with respect to free trade agreement partner countries. Now, in this free trade agreement partner countries are not just the bilateral trade agreements, is also including the WTO, and that's why he's attacked the multilateral, the MFN tariffs, and he's abandoned MFN tariffs, um, and um, and the USTR was also given the responsibility of so what he was doing was that he was aiming at concluding trade agreements with the explicit intent of benefiting only his constituents, like I mentioned earlier, and which is another first in the realm of bilateral trade deals, as I just mentioned. Now, in this context, I find it very intriguing that government of India actually started doing these bilateral trade negotiations with the US. And of course, and I find it intriguing even more because the reciprocal tariff plan, which was announced on 13th of February, was immediately, that announcement came immediately preceding Prime Minister's meeting with Donald Trump. And of course, so it was very clear that the US was at its aggressive worst, because the reciprocal tariff plan is again something that a document you people must read to really get the flavor of what he's doing. And how can the government of India just go and start engaging with this kind of an aggressive America just a few hours later? I was actually asking one of my diplomat friends that, and I know for a fact, and that earlier in the earlier regimes, there always used to be a plan B or plan C. So some of us, who were actually part of the trade negotiating team, and we as professionals, we always used to work out alternatives. That the government goes with this alternative, with this option. Now, this option actually may not work out in reality, and then you have to think on your feet. So instead of doing that, and Center for WTO Studies was created for this, that you provide options, give options to the officials who are negotiating in the negotiating room, that these are to be done. But it seems we don't have any plan B or plan C today. So if you have a plan A, you just go there, and then something happens which you haven't anticipated, then you're in trouble. You get caught. And now we are now nicely caught. And it's also surprising that we started at this negotiations at this juncture with a country with whom we did not even think in terms of engaging in free trade FTA negotiations. Now, if US is our largest trade partner and largest export destination for at least just more than a decade. Now, the most logical thing would be that if you're actually, sort of integrating with the global economy in this manner, you would first you would go to your largest trade partner, or at least the largest export destination, to increase your footprint in that market. But we didn't. Why didn't we? And this is, well, there are many reasons, and I'll explain a little later. There are many reasons which actually prevented us from not starting negotiations with the US, while with all the other major economies, yeah, with all the, I would say, G7 countries, we have either concluded or we will, EU negotiation should conclude very soon. We would have done trade deals. US was the only exception. So we at the absolutely wrong time to start doing these negotiations. And now, of course, the What is the difference between what we did and what the other countries? US has actually done deals with 6 other countries in this, last last month, until last month, and until he actually started implementing his reciprocal tariff plan. Each of these countries, with each of these countries, the deals involve only tariffs. So it's only the tariff which is at stake. But if you are doing a bilateral comprehensive trade agreement, what are you doing? Actually, we are putting on the table a whole host of domestic policies. And many of these policies were systematically being targeted by the US for a long time. Again, as I said, that I'll go into the detail. Now, I won't. No one will argue that we didn't see this president's, the Trump's America First trade policy. No one would argue that they didn't see it coming. It was really coming. And yesterday, you would have heard the special secretary, Commerce Ministry, also say that this has been happening, and so everyone knows it that this was coming. And I think Ram Kumar in his presentation also said that Biden had taken certain policies, and this is a logical next step that we are seeing here. Of course, I would say that we actually go back even further. This whole thing was, like I mentioned earlier, that it was started by Obama. And what did Obama do? And Obama actually took two, sort of measures. And the first was that. He took what he called "Make It in America" initiative. Yeah. So again, from domestic on the sort of reinvigorating the US's economy, and this was a realization that came as the Great Recession, as we say, the financial crisis of 2008 hit the U.S. Economy, and with the kind of increasing trade deficit that the U.S. faced, U.S. Policymakers realized that this is unsustainable. So we need to do something. Yeah, so the Make in America was, in a way, the first activist trade policy that the US had adopted since they abandoned sort of government intervention for market. What Hairal is talking about, that he's lamenting that we are not doing here, but the US got on this track after 2008, Obama. And if you look at, I wrote a paper then, documenting all the different initiatives that the Obama administration had taken. And this was an activist trade policy, nothing short of it. It didn't call it a trade policy, though. It called it a Make in America scheme. Although the European Union did have a document which was industrial policy for the 21st century. So they were more open about it. The US didn't. And a key component of this Make in America initiative was the Buy American Act. The Buy American Act was actually for promoting the use of domestically produced products. And when this Buy American Act was put in place, this was one of the first legislations of the New Deal. And when the US, was first engaged in a trade war with other countries, and then when they went about settling their problems, they have a whole range of reciprocal tariff acts. Buy American Act was an important part of this legislation. The second, and for your information, the second important legislation was the Farm Act. And the Farm Act is the agricultural policy of the US, which was put in place in 33 and is actually been there even today. Now, US has, I think, about 2% of their workforce in agriculture, but they have an agricultural policy, a full-fledged agricultural policy talking about the support, the subsidies and other kinds of government handouts that would be provided. Now there are very few family farmers. There are mostly the corporates, but that is it. And India, in our 80 years, sort of post-independence history, we haven't been able to put in place an agricultural policy. Now, that is the irony of it. I thought I'll just mention it. So Buy American policy actually imposed restrictions on acquisition of foreign goods by federal agencies. So the protectionism had started then, and it actually and what Obama did, of course, was that the emphasis more was at the level of states, and whatever the states were doing, they had been asked to procure from the U.S. suppliers, and that was the first instance of U.S. protectionism. It came an indirect route. The second thing that the Obama did, and that's why I said that he is the original sinner in terms of the breaking down of the multilateral trading system, that he started the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. And this was a small agreement between four countries, New Zealand, Peru, Singapore, and one other country, I'm forgetting now. And Obama took advantage of this negotiations taking place on the sidelines and jumped into it straight off, and then brought another, sort of got 11 countries around him. And he started negotiating TPP and moved away from the WTO negotiations on the Doha Development Agenda. Now, this is where I said earlier that we were trying to mend the WTO, and one of our big, agenda for mending the WTO was the Doha Development Agenda, and we call it Development Agenda because this was supposed to rebalance. And if you look at the Doha Ministerial Declaration of 2001, it had several provisions, several, sort of items, agenda items, which were supposed to rebalance the various key agreements of the WTO, including agriculture, intellectual property, and others, and give it again and give WTO more development orientation. So that was a move away from multilateralism, what Trump has done is taken the Obama agenda of dismantling the WTO more directly and forward, and he started with it straight away by first, of course, dismantling the dispute settlement mechanism, and now effectively disengaging from WTO, except to ask very uncomfortable questions of a number of countries, including India, on issues like farm subsidies and all. So now, okay, now. I'm just trying to skip a few things, in the interest of time, so we can have some discussions on this. Okay. Now, now Trump's way of reviving the domestic economy, had made it again clear right from his campaign days in the second presidency that he would force foreign firms to establish production facilities in the U.S. and create American jobs, promote economic growth, and bolster the position of the dollar as the world's reserve currency. Now, there is always this question about whether there is, you mentioned the de-dollarization issue. So he's quite aware of the fact that, that there is a real pressure on the US dollar. And again, I don't want to get into this issue because, the kind of trade, US, of course, US's trade deficit, as long as US maintains this kind of trade deficit, and Triffin told us decades back, this actually lubricates the global economy. And if the US starts, the dollar deficit arises, then just the obverse happens. And I think Trump knows in his heart of hearts, at least the observers have actually told him, that this policy of balancing trade, of getting rid of these deficits, is going to get into a situation where you're going to be seeding, you're going to be sowing the seeds of de-dollarization. Because as soon as there is going to be a dollar crisis, because reducing trade deficit means that there is going to be less supply of dollar in the international economy. Then there are other countries, and China is actually, the way China has been using its currency, and the number of bilateral swap arrangements that the Chinese have done for at least 10 years now, makes it very clear. And of course, the BRICS are talking about the current common currency. Whether it comes out or not, that's a different matter. But yuan is certainly there, waiting in the wings to do some damage. I won't say replacing the dollar. So de-dollarization is something that it becomes a real possibility. And the second thing that Trump said, that look, he would take other countries' jobs, and as he laid out his plans to drastically reduce taxes and lower energy costs and regulations for manufacturers that establish production facilities in the US. And what you're talking about, that is reducing the taxes for the rich, the corporates. He has to make it up for somewhere. Now, this is how he's actually trying to make it up, and he would take other countries' jobs. So you can already see this happen, because the next attack also is going to be on the service sector. Already, these anti-immigrant sentiments are reverberating in the US. Students going to the US are finding it difficult to get their visas, and many of these students were actually joining the American workforce after passing out. And this is going to happen. So he's taking away other countries' jobs. So the first step is that, sort of nip the whole problem in the bud. Don't let the foreign students come to my country. India is actually facing this the music. So the reciprocal tariffs. So again, what is Trump's narrative on this? So he said that, and I'm quoting him, that if they tax us, we tax them the same amount. They tax us, we tax them, and and almost in all cases, they're taxing us, and we haven't been taxing them. So this is a very simple philosophy. Then he elaborated, if they want to charge us, that's fine, but we are going to charge them the same thing. And and Trump's Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, emphasized even before his confirmation by the U.S. Congress that reciprocity is something that is going to be a key topic for the Trump administration, and this intent was of course coming, because the reciprocal tariffs was mentioned by Trump, quite often. Now, reciprocal tariffs is weaponizing trade, and nothing short of that. You're using an important trade policy instrument to get after your partner countries, and to remove, as Trump said, unfair trade practices that the US has been facing. Again, as I said earlier, that you must see the reciprocal tariff plan to really understand how this is really working out. Now, what it does is that it tears into shreds the um, the decade-long tariff negotiations that were conducted under the GATT, and this was based on certain principles that I'm just going to be talking about. Now, what did the multilateral trading system say to begin with? Um, I said that the founders of the GATT and the WTO, there's almost a sort of almost similar preamble to both these documents, the GATT and the WTO, the Marrakesh Agreement establishing the WTO. And what does it say? That the relations in the field of trade and economic endeavor should be conducted with a view to raising standards of living, ensure full employment. Now, WTO talks about full employment in 1994 when it was established, where the Marrakesh Agreement was signed. Ensure full employment and a large and steadily growing volume of real income and effective demand. You should please, this language should please many of us, and expanding the production and of trade in goods and services while allowing the optimal use of the world's resources in accordance with the objectives of sustainable development, seeking both to protect and preserve the environment and to enhance the means for doing so and in a manner consistent with their respective needs and concerns at different levels of development. So it's one of the criticism that we had of this neoliberal policies of globalization was it was trying to force one size fits all thing. But WTO doesn't talk about it. It talks about the fact that countries can opt for liberalization at their own pace and their needs and concerns of development. Uh, and it further said that there is a need for positive efforts designed to ensure that developing countries, and especially the least developed among them, secure a share in the global growth in the growth of international trade commensurate with the needs of their economic development. So it's very clear that you are talking about bringing up those countries who have actually been disadvantaged, and the immiserization clause by trade has been long been documented, starting from Prohibition Singer, and of course in more recent decades as well. So the multilateral trading system actually made two important points in support of developing countries, and recognize that developing countries would not be able to take the same level of commitments for opening up the markets as their advanced country counterparts would. Uh, so. So Trump's policies actually put at serious risk all these agreements on market access in agriculture, non-agricultural market access, which are actually based on this principle of non-reciprocity that the advanced countries, and this is actually put very clearly in the WTO, there was this. In the 60s, when again there was a push by many of the developing countries, including India, to and this of course had the support of uh, of Raul Prebisch, who was the first Secretary General of the UNCTAD, and this push for making the GATT more oriented to the needs of the developing countries, introduced this concept of what we now call special and differential treatment for developing countries. And there's a whole chapter, the whole chapter of GATT, which is now called the Part 4 of the GATT, which is focused on economic development, almost elaborating the preamble that I spoke about. Now, one of the important S&D provision, I might need to mention it specifically because what Trump is doing is killing this provision, especially, is Article 36 of the GATT, which says that the developed contracting parties, because GATT is an agreement, it was a ad hoc agreement, so they're all contracting parties, countries were all contracting parties. So developed contracting parties do not expect reciprocity in trade negotiations to reduce or remove tariffs, and other barriers to trade of less developed contracting parties. Now, this was the heart and soul of the GATT tariff negotiations. And so this article allowed developing countries to maintain high levels of tariffs. So until we joined the WTO, the tariffs, the level of tariffs that India would impose was actually decided in the finance ministry, not in Geneva. And so we had complete control over our tariff policy. But after WTO, of course, this whole thing shifted. And but the principles of non-reciprocity were still followed. Yeah. Uh, so now, what are the problems now? I'll just briefly talk about the problems that India has in case of our bilateral trade agreement negotiations. And as I mentioned, that we have walked into this agreement at a wrong time, and also that the Commerce Ministry officials have not been reading all these documents systematically being produced by the US Trade Administration, which have targeted the US, the India's trade and economic policies. I'll just refer to two documents, which is the first was in 2014. There's a very interesting document, and you must read that. The trade it's called the Trade, Investment and Industrial Policies in India, Effects on the India and the US economy. Now this was in 2014, and when the US does produces these reports, they actually get a whole host of experts to to talk about their views. Yeah. Now in this report, when this report was being produced, Arvind Subramaniam, this was in April 2014, Arvind Subramaniam appeared before USITC, the US International Trade Commission, and deposed before this commission, saying that India's policies do not favor the US, and the US should actually take India to the WTO, and they should initiate disputes there to make India bend and follow what US wants it to do. Okay, this was in April. And in October 2014, Arvind Subramaniam was appointed the chief economic advisor. Yeah. And I know if anyone wants to know anything about how the government functions, this is what it is. Yeah. And the second document that I would like you, but must see, is called the National Trade Estimate. This is an annual report produced by the U.S. Trade Representative, where all the significant barriers faced by the U.S. Exports and other in foreign investment are documented. And this came in the last version of this came in April this year. So what is US targeting in this trade in the trade agreement? Of course, the huge chunk of the agricultural market is no secret that they're doing it, and uh, they have been systematically targeting this for a long time. And again, they have the different lobbies, the agricultural agribusiness. They have been systematically lobbying with the Trump, with the Trump, with the president himself. And why have they been doing? Because they have a legitimacy. Because if you look at all the agricultural counties in the U.S. where there is a substantial agricultural interest, 78% of those counties actually voted for Trump. So now this is the payback period. So he won't actually take anything less than what he wants to do with the U.S. with India. Sorry. Um, and so apart from market access, there is also attack on India's on subsidies, and they want India's subsidies to come down. Of course, US is the largest provider of farm subsidies, and the subsidies have gone up from I think 61 billion in 1995 now to almost 240 billion. The farm subsidies have actually gone up. So we are in quite a bit of a problem now. So it's just not that our markets are being targeted, our other policies, agricultural subsidies are being targeted, and there is a systematic attack. So what are the options that we have? A lot of people have said a lot of things about this. So the the first thing that a lot of the hawks have said that we must retaliate. Now, I don't know, I would also like to hear from you. I don't think retaliation is really the option that is before us. And we can't really go far enough. The second option is, of course, decoupling from the US. And that is a real, I think, possibility we should explore. And here again, what my friend Harilal is talking about, unless the government gets active, unless we have a proper industrial policy, and what we are having as an industrial policy as in the PLI scheme is really a sham. It's not going anywhere. I've actually also commented on this in the past. Last year, I wrote a long article on that. It's not going anywhere. We have to decouple from the US. And the third option, again, it needs to be explored very seriously, is to engage more with the developing countries. Now, India used to be one of the major, I think, leaders of the developing world. Again, the WTO negotiations, I've seen it myself. We used to champion the cause of developing countries, get them together. And that has to be done. But I think that needs a change in the political thinking, because I think there is also section in the those who are advising the government think that India is not a developing country anymore, and we are now obsessed with this whole developed India being a developed country, and this syndrome has actually hit us. Now look at the contrast, and finally I've just finished with this contrast and between India and China. Now, in 2012, prior to 2012, our largest export destination was the UAE, and in 2012, US became our largest destination for the first time. We're exporting about 12% of our total exports to the US. Today, it's gone beyond 20%. Yeah. Now, China in 2015 thereabouts was exporting almost 20% of their exports to the US. Today, it is down to below 12%. The latest numbers is, I think, to 11.8% or something. So if you look at the graph, you just visualize this. It's just kind of a scissors thing that. And China actually saw this thing coming, and they moved away from the US, actually went to the other, the developing countries. They expanded their footprint in Africa and other countries, including us. Our exposure to China has actually increased in these years when China was moving out of the US. But we have got more engaged because I have a theory here that it was very easy for the rent seekers, I won't call them entrepreneurs in this country, to get into the US market because of the large diaspora. Until the recently, China started using Singapore for exporting to us. There were only two countries with whom India had substantial trade surplus. One is US, the other was Singapore. Of course, the major countries. I'm not talking about the smaller countries in the neighborhood and all. We had safe trade surplus, and this came very easy because there is a market waiting to be exploited. But in other major economies, we have found it very difficult to enter those markets. So I think what we need to do is to get out of this kind of a situation by proactively investing in in our different sectors of the economy. Industrial policy is, of course, a very important part. Also, an agricultural policy. I don't know how many of you know that of the total investment in our country, agriculture receives less than 6%. Now, you can't actually have a sector which is supporting the largest segment of your workforce just survive on 6% of your less than 6% of your the total investment. So there needs to be an overhaul of this whole thing. And again, I go back to what Harilal said, that the state has to take the a leading role. And if you keep relying just on the market forces, you're going to be ending up in the kind of mess that we have that we find ourselves now. As I said earlier, it's very difficult to stop me when I start speaking, but it was wonderful speaking with all of you. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to respond. Thank you very much.
We can have the general discussion after finishing the reflections. Thank you very much, Professor. Then next, I will invite Professor C. Balgobal, Chairman, KSDC, to have his views on this. Balgobal will be on the online mode. കണ്ടില്ല പേര് കണ്ടില്ല ഉണ്ടോ ഇല്ല ഇല്ല ഓക്കെ then we will have Professor Viramani's reflections on this. After finishing this, then we can have an open discussion.
Thank you. I have a PPT here. Can someone upload that? Oh, it's there. This one, right? Okay. Okay. So thank you, Professor Harilal and Gift for inviting me for this on a very important topic. So my approach here is to take a data-based, kind of a look at assessment of what is the impact of these Trump tariffs for Indian economy, and also in a comparative perspective, I also take some other Asian countries for comparison, and also what are the immediate and longer term policy options, which is basically the title of the seminar. So let me start with some basic facts. So what is shown in this graph is the United States trade relationship with India. And for comparison, I also include three other major groups in Asia. One is ASEAN, then China, and also Vietnam. Why I include Vietnam is because in recent times, it has become a very major exporter in Asia. So you can see the first graph on the left side, what is happening to, so what is it showing is the US trade, US export and US import from these countries. The left side is the US export to these countries. So you see that in the Indian case, the US export as a share of total US export has gone up from 0.5% in 1991 to about 2%. So it's very small, even though it has gone up. India accounts for only 2% of total US exports today. And China accounts for 7% of US export. It has declined. Earlier, it was little higher, close to 9%. Now it has declined to 7% of total US export, ASEAN 6%, and Vietnam very small, 0.6%. Now look at the reverse. That means US import. That means these Asian countries export to US. So on the US import share, you see that for India, it has gone up to 2.7%. So you see there is a relatively greater, dependence of US on Indian import. So that means India's export. So 2.7%. And China, it has declined. It was 22% earlier, few years back, and now it has, that was 22% was just before the Trump won that time, earlier term of President Trump. After that, you see there is a steady decline, a major decline from 22% to 14%. And you see that when China's share in total import of US has declined almost by 8% from there, 22 to 14%. ASEAN has gained by almost 50% of that. It has increased from 7% to 11%. So this could be a kind of trade diversion. So the US tariffs against China has gone up. So some of the Chinese goods could be going via ASEAN to the US. That could be happening. Now, important takeaway from this graph is that India-US trade is growing, but it is still very below potential. It is just 2%. The total US export share to India is only 2%, and India's total export share to US is means on the other side it is 2.7%. So it is below potential from that side, from US side. US trade relationship with India side, it is much below potential. So purely from a trade standpoint, the economic dependence of China, ASEAN, India, and Vietnam on the US market exceeds the US reliance on these economies. That means these countries, all of these countries, including India, China, ASEAN, they need US much more than US need them. That is a fact, right? So purely from a trade point of view, I'm not considering here all other aspects, geopolitical issues, investment, labor flows and all that. Now, this is what here we do is, we take these two shares, which is shown earlier, and take a ratio of that. Why I do this is because this is what is bothering Trump. Basically he's worried about the trade deficit with these countries, because these countries are exporting far more to the US than they are buying from the US. That is his worry. So we can find out the two export shares, the two shares, and take the ratio. And when we take the ratio, it is basically US export share divided by US import share for these countries. In all the cases, it is less than 1. If it is balanced, trade is balanced, it becomes 1. And that is what he wanted. He wanted either trade balance or it should be above 1. But in these cases, it is all below 1. So he's attacking these countries with reciprocal tariff. And in this case, India is relatively at a better position because the ratio is 0.74. What is the difference? Difference is 0.26. And that is the tariff he is imposing on India, right? A 25% tariff. It is basically, broadly, his idea is to make it 1 so that the deficit goes away. And it is not exactly this thing that is the formula. Formula is slightly different, but it is coincidence that the tariff that is imposed on India is 25%, which is basically to make this 1 so that the trade deficit go away. Now, the Trump tariffs were triggered mainly by the values shown in this graph, which is an analytically meaningless basis for any type of policy. Like fixing this bilateral trade deficit on an individual country basis has no basis at all. It has no rationale, either from a theoretical point of view or any empirical point of view, and therefore thinking that somehow you can address the problem that they are facing by fixing individual countries' trade deficit. That will not work because you may fix a trade deficit with one country, but then that deficit will come up somewhere else with another country. So how are you going to address this? It will not work this way, but somehow they are thinking in a, what we call in a partial equilibrium lens. Like, there is so much of trade deficit with India, address it so that will be solved. But he is not thinking that this will have repercussions elsewhere. So products will come, the Indian products, earlier the products which they used to buy from India, they may start buying from some other country. So he may fixes the trade deficit with India, but then trade deficit with some other country will go up. So this will not work. So this has no basis. But while analytically it is unfounded, such tariffs are used as a pressure tactic to push countries into trade negotiations. So that is what he is using. It has no economic logic at all. Now, look at this bargain power asymmetry. Now, all these Asian countries, including even China, has a asymmetric or a lower bargaining power vis-a-vis US. That is happening because these countries, these Asian countries, dependence on the US market is much higher from a trade point of view. Their export share to the US. So that what is shown here is that Trump's bargaining power is basically the share of the US market in each country's total exports to the world. So what is the US share in ASEAN's total export? In ASEAN's total export, the US share is 15.5% in 2024. And whereas for the US, the share of their export going to ASEAN is only 6%. So there is a gap there. Like, so the ASEAN depends on, ASEAN's dependence on the US is 15.5%, but whereas US's dependence on ASEAN is only 6%. So there is an asymmetry there. Trump has a tremendous bargaining power vis-a-vis ASEAN. Look at China. There also, Trump has a bargaining power which is almost like a double. Like Chinese, 14.7% of Chinese exports are going to the US market, whereas on the reverse, only 7% of the US exports are going to China. So therefore, again, there Trump has an advantage there. What about Vietnam? You see such a huge gap. 27.5% of Vietnam's total export is going to US, but only 0.5% of US total export is going to Vietnam. So Vietnam has to agree for a zero tariff. So because the bargaining power asymmetry is so huge, so Vietnam is willing to give a 0% tariff access to US to the Vietnamese market, and at the same time accept 19% tariff to the US because the stakes are very high for Vietnam. Because 27.5% of their total exports are going to US, and if that market is gone, then Vietnam will suffer a lot. So they are willing to give a 0% tariff to US and then accept whatever Trump is offering for them, which is 19%. So that is what you can see. When it comes to India, again, there is a huge disadvantage for us when we have to have a bargain based on this trade arithmetic, right? So 18.3% of our exports are going to US, but only 2% of their exports are coming to India. So there is a huge difference. We have very weak bargaining power. Now, how China managed it, even though in terms of these shares, which are shown here, again, China has a lower bargaining power, but then they have control over certain very strategic products, rare earth materials, certain important items within global supply chains, because they control the global supply chains. So because of that, their major role in global supply chains and rare earth materials and some strategic products, etc., they have much better bargaining power. India doesn't have so many such things, except maybe generic drugs in pharmaceuticals. Apart from that, this type of bargaining power vis-a-vis Trump for us, as of now, from a trade point of view, is limited. So that means we need to give up if a deal has to happen. Otherwise, this is not going to happen. And that is, he knows that. Now, obviously, there are geopolitical bargaining power. That's different. Like, India getting closer to China or getting closer to Russia. That is the only thing that India can bargain with US, not from a trade point of view. Okay, now this is Trump dominance ratio. What is it? It's simply like, take the two shares that I mentioned earlier, take the ratio of that, the two. If the values are above 1, that much dominance Trump has over these countries. And you see that these values are all above 1. Vietnam has a much higher value. And with India, it is 9, which is high, because the difference is very high between India and the United States. So in all these cases, Trump clearly has an advantage. Now, what we did here, as I said earlier, in CDS, we have started this work right from the beginning. As soon as this discussion about India-US negotiation possibility came up, we started doing empirical work. So I just want to show some of the very preliminary result. We are going to release this report, which has all the detailed numbers, etc. But here I just wanted to give some very preliminary results, what we did. So we took the India-US trade statistics at the 6-digit level of HS, which is the most disaggregated one that is available. We took the India-US data on both exports, imports, tariff rates on these products, and import demand elasticities for each one of those products. And then we applied a very simple arithmetic, which is what would be the change in import in the US market or vis-a-vis in the Indian market if we negotiate a deal. How much import is going to take place in each of the 6-digit product. How is that calculated? We need certain parameters. One is the elasticity of imports with respect to import prices. So when import prices fall, tariff rise means the import prices increase, right? Tariff reduction means import prices fall. How much would be the import changing, right? The import is going to change. Then there is it's a elasticity of, it is basically import demand elasticity, like, how much the demand for goods are going to change when the prices fall or rise. The other one is a pass-through coefficient, which is pass-through of tariff to import prices, which is the elasticity of import prices with respect to tariffs. When tariffs change, what proportion of that tariff is getting, what is the pass-through coefficient of that into import prices? So if there is a 10% increase in tariff, the prices will increase by how much? Is it 10% or is it less than 10%? If prices also increase by 10%, we say that the pass-through coefficient is 1. If the prices increase less than 10%, we say that it's an imperfect pass-through. The pass-through coefficients are less than 1. So we use that also. And there is a recent study published in American Economic Review, which gives this pass-through coefficient. They give a value 0.94 something, a very high pass-through coefficient. So we assumed two situations, a perfect pass-through situation, 1, and also 0.9, slightly below what is they have reported. And delta T is the change in tariff, and then the original import value. So based on these, we can estimate for each product what would be the increase in import or decrease in import, depending upon the scenario that we are considering for each of the products. Then we add up all of these, and then we will get the total impact. So that is what is being done. And in terms of the quantification of the impact, we consider a number of scenarios, like, because things are changing on a day-to-day basis. So once we finish one scenario, something else comes up. Then we'll have to estimate based on that thing. So if we consider that this retaliatory tariff of this buying, oil from Russia, somehow we negotiate and say that, no, don't do that, then only 25% tariff remain, then Indian export would decline by about 28 to 31 billion dollars. So that is the adverse impact that we estimate from here. On the other hand, if Trump goes ahead with a 50% tariff, 25 plus 25, the decline of Indian export to the US market will be in the range of 56 billion to 63 billion dollar. But a study also says, suggests certain ways forward, some immediate measure. One is to identify products for mutual liberalization between India and US, and the Commerce Secretary indicates that these negotiations are still going on. A deal might happen. So we are showing what is the way this deal can happen so that both countries are, can agree on certain things. So we use, the revealed comparative advantage concept. So basically what the idea that we use here is that we identify the products where the US has a strong demand from imports, right? Not a domestic demand. Anyway, they are importing certain products. So identify which are those products which they import a lot based on their import RCA, import revealed comparative advantages. So if the import-based revealed comparative advantage is greater than 1, we consider that those are the products that US depend on other countries for their own import, not from India, but from other countries. We exclude India from that calculation. So then we also look at products where India has a strong export supply. So we don't consider those products where India do not export at all. We consider only those products where Indian exports are quite significant. We have decided certain cutoff points. Like, this many exports should be there from India to some countries. That means we have an export capability. We have a supply that is available here. So if these kind of things are done, and if we identify those sets, and if we negotiate in those products and say that for these products, you've cut down your tariff. Similarly, the reverse, right? Reverse means that these are those products where India is anyway importing. May not be from US, but from other countries. But what we can do is that give that market access to US, say that for these products, we'll cut down tariff. So instead of importing, let's say, certain product from Germany or EU, we allow this import to come from US. So Trump is happy, right? So these imports is basically an idea of trade diversion. So you get it from import. We say that we will reduce our tariff for these products. And these are the products also where US anyway export. There also we look at whether they have a domestic capability to export these products. So they will be happy with those products. And we are also happy because anyway we are importing, we are allowing US to do it. So I am thinking here not as an economist. This is outside my economic knowledge. I am thinking here purely as a negotiator. Right? From that point of view, if I look at it, as an economist, if I look at it, I will not do this exercise. So I am looking at it from a different point of view. From that point of view, we see that there are mutual gains which are possible, keeping agriculture out. Right? So we know that Indian negotiators are not going to reduce tariffs for these dairy products, agriculture products, etc. So keeping agriculture products purely for industrial products, if you focus, there is still situations where win-win outcomes can be obtained. So this is what we are, and we have identified in this study. We have identified the set of products that Indian negotiator can offer. Say that these are the products where we can have a lower tariffs, zero tariffs, etc. And the other way around. So what about time?
No, we can take 2 more minutes.
2 more minutes.
And I was thinking whether Bhargava is on.
Okay.
It's available.
Right. Yeah, I need only 2 to 3 minutes. So what is the way forward in this context? So this is what I said in terms of immediate, because the seminar title says immediate and long term. So the immediate is what I would say, try for these kind of negotiations. So it may work, it may not work, but it is possible. What is the long term? Long term, I think we have to think beyond this trade-based, kind of approach. So what I am showing here is that, we think that, India can become a developed country by 2047. Now, I want to look at whether that is at all possible. Is it at all feasible? We talk about it a lot and we keep hearing about it. Now, to understand this, what I am showing here is, look at India's share in world GDP and look at India's share in world population. So whenever we say that India is a large country, we all think that we are a large country. But what we have in mind is our population, which is very large, 18% of the population. But when we look at world GDP, we are not a large country. We are just 3.5% of world GDP. So if you take these two shares, it shows our economic power vis-a-vis demographic power, right? So if this ratio is 1, it means that our economic power is equal to our demographic power. If it is below 1, it means that we have very little economic power, even though we have a very high demographic power. Look at that. Now, if you compare this India, Vietnam, and China, India is very low. It is that ratio is 0.19 in 2024. So China has reached 1, in 2020. And so that means their economic power is equal to their demographic power. Now, if India has to become a developed country, what is China's per capita income today? They are very close to achieving the developed country threshold. It is at 12,600. The developed country high income threshold is 14,000. Now, India today, in terms of this ratio, is equivalent to China in 2000. China's ratio in 2000 was 0.19. In 2001, it was 0.19. India's ratio today is 0.19. But that means for China could achieve ratio 1 within a span of 20 years. They could achieve ratio 1 within a span of 20 years. That means in principle, India can also do. So it's not a 2047 dream is not completely unrealistic. We can't say that, but then it is conditional. Conditional on what? We have to follow a China-motivated, China-inspired growth strategy. What China did, we need to get it. Now people would say, no, we cannot create another China. We cannot, there is not enough space. Geopolitical conditions have completely changed. All those things are there. I'm not denying all those facts. But then if we find a way out, it is possible. And the key success factor is what? The gap is coming. Why it is not 1? It is not 1 because our labor productivity is very low. Each one of our labor or workers are producing far too less. That is why it is not 1. So if the labor productivity goes up, we can make it 1. Now, what is the way to improve the labor productivity? Your within industry productivity, between industry, reallocation. Both should have structural transformation has to happen. Resources should flow from low productive activities to high productive activities. So therefore, average productivity, labor productivity goes up. And within industry also productivity has to go up. So that is the only way to make it 1. Now, in that process, what is the role of trade? In that process, trade plays an important role, as we can see in the case of China and Vietnam also. Like, what is shown here is the share of each country in world exports divided by their share in world population. Here also, Vietnam has achieved 1. That means their share in world export is equal to their share in world GDP. China also achieved very high ratio there. Even though it is not 1, a large country cannot achieve 1 because they have a significant non-tradable. But they have achieved something close to 0.6. Where is India? So that gap need to go up. So we need to become more outward oriented. That is imperative for that thing to happen. Second, our usual focus on skilling, infrastructure, all that need to happen, education, human capital, as Professor Harilal said, industrial policy, all this has to happen. These are all have to happen in an endogenous way. And we cannot look at the domestic market as the source of this growth because, as I already said, our domestic market is not that high. Population is high, but purchasing power is low. And there is a paper by, Aravind Subramanian and Chatterjee written that there is an increasing debt burden of households, firms, and government. So future growth of domestic demand is not going to be that high if the debt of governments, firms, and households all going up. So we have to look at the outside market, and that has to be part of the strategy. Now, way forward, one is the strategic negotiation, which is the best case scenario. Engage in tariff negotiation modeled on India-UK FTA. Second one is a multilateral coalition, which is the large-scale FTA with major economies, excluding the US, like EU, China, ASEAN, Japan, and BRICS countries. Now, this is important because US account for only 15% of global trade. 85% of global trade is happening outside US. Now, if you open up with these larger block, which accounts for 85% of global trade, whatever we lose here can be compensated through that, through that increased market access in 85% elsewhere. Option 3 is a free trade agreement, which is with the EU. We have to revisit our stance with respect to RCEP, right? China. And then tariff retaliation is the worst case. Currently, it is avoided. Trade retaliation remains a high risk, low gain strategy. And finally, this is important. We need to think about the domestic reform. As I said earlier, if that productivity gap has to be bridged, we need to think about the domestic reforms, which includes the regulatory reforms, also trade reforms, is the non-tariff barriers through regulatory simplification, rules of origin streamlining, that to reduce compliance cost, rationalize tariff structure, correct tariff inversion, etc. All these internal reforms are very, very important. So with this, I conclude. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Veeramani. Now we'll have the views of Professor Harilal.
Professor Bishildhar, in fact, today is a very happy day for Kerala Economic Association. We are having this seminar, and we had two very interesting, informative presentations done by two of the leading trade economists of the country. And that way, K is particularly happy because we got both of you together. Now, K is happy for other reasons also. Today we are going to have our executive committee meeting immediately after this. And in the afternoon, we are going to have the first governing body meeting of the Kerala Economic Association's Institute for Surveys and Studies. So we are getting into research, not duplicating the work of GIFT or CDS. We are not capable of doing that. At least now, maybe probably in the future, we'll acquire such capabilities. But we are very sure that we will be able to really do quite a lot of surveys and studies, which will be useful for Indian economy, Kerala government, Kerala economy, and also for business, etc. So all these things are going to happen today. And since both of you have presented, your views in detail about the Trump tariffs, I think I shouldn't be speaking a lot because we have quite a lot of people participating here and online. Around 70 people are there online. They will all, many of them would probably like to ask questions and all. So I'll take a few minutes and stop. In fact, I have written an article in EPW where I argued how the Trump tariffs are going to really completely destroy the multilateral trading system in a systematic way. Even if Trump wants to go back, it will be very difficult to go back to the WTO system because he has violated everything, all the principles in multiple ways in the WTO. So even if Trump wants to go back, it will be difficult. I will try to establish that point by taking the suggestions by Professor Veeramani. Professor Veeramani was saying that no, we should negotiate with Trump. Of course, we should negotiate with Trump by USA, and our Commerce Ministry is doing that. And we should also get into negotiations with other countries of the world, which we are doing. We recently signed an FTA with UK, and our negotiations with the FTA concluded. With EU, we are progressing, and we are negotiating similar agreements with so many countries. So if US is behaving like this, we are opening possibilities in other areas, and we should be seriously following up that. But now, when we negotiate with the USA, I fully agree that in some areas, we can give concessions. The CDS study, in fact, will certainly identify areas where we'll be able to give our market to USA without really hurting our industry or farm in a major way. Of course, there'll be pressure to give up in the area of farm and all. Those will have domestic problems. But there will be areas where we can, in fact, we are importing in any way from other sources. So we can reduce our tariff against USA and allow more import from USA. The problem is the moment we give extra concessions to United States of America, we are violating the most favored nation clause of the WTO system. So normally other countries will be complaining because in the WTO system, it is a non-discriminatory system. The moment you extend a particular concession to a particular country or a group of countries, you are supposed to extend the same benefits to all other WTO members. Otherwise, we should enter into an FTA with USA. Now, we will have to get into an FTA with USA means it's a long process. If you're going by the WTO processes, you'll have to notify the WTO, and we'll have to convince the WTO that this FTA is a genuine FTA. In the sense, it will lead to complete elimination of tariffs over a period of time. Otherwise, WTO cannot agree to that process. There is a process by which WTO recognizes FTAs. So we will be violating the MFN principle. Now look at the whole thing from the US point of view. United States of America is bargaining with each country, saying that we will have a differential treatment to you. We'll give you a differential treatment to you. That is completely against most favored nation principle. That is completely against principle of non-discrimination. That is completely against competition. That's completely against free trade. Because he is treating each country differently. Then after having done that, how can he go back to the WTO system? The MFN principle is totally lost. You cannot get back to that. And of course, the binding of tariffs, etc. So many other principles Trump is violating. And if any other country had violated, then they would have been subject to all kind of disciplinary measures. A lot of duties would have been imposed on them. I'm not elaborating on this point, how Trump is destroying the multilateral trading system. The point is, we are not going to have any more the WTO system. World has already lost the WTO arrangement. We are going into a different kind of a world order. And we should prepare for that world order. And Veeramani and Professor Dar, both of them have given ideas regarding how to live in such a trade disorder or new order. Anyway, post WTO order. There, no, you'll have to have FTAs with different groups of countries. We should start negotiating with everybody. We should also give concessions to USA. It will be basically a reciprocal tariff system. Trump's usage is very correct. We will treat each party. We will treat each party according to our convenience. This is also referred to as transactional approach. Every transaction is a different transaction. That's what Trump's method is referred to as transactional approach in international economics, international trade and dealing. So there's no history. If you want to sign a contract with somebody, if you want to buy something, just for that contract, just for that trade, you have some principles. Otherwise, you forget about the principles. And the same principles will not be applied to another country, another supplier. So we are back into a system where complete disorder is there. I'm not saying that the earlier order was great and all. There were problems we were all criticizing. But now we are getting into a place where only might is right. And we will have to plan accordingly. And whether we can do a China again. China had this advantage of dealing with the free trade world when China itself was not following free trade. China had a strong state and it was manipulating its currency. And Trump and America was completely right when they say that China had manipulated its currency. China maintained trade surplus for decades together. But Chinese currency was kept at a low value through manipulations in the market. And they never allowed foreign institutional investors to decide China's fate. They always controlled foreign institutional investors. Now, the problem is this. If you are going ahead with the freedom given to foreign institutional investors, and if you are working with the global financial capital without any restrictions, I know Indian state cannot do anything. Indian state will be operating under what I call the fiscal conservative regime. That is 3%. You can borrow only up to 3%. You cannot tax, and also on interest rate, monetary policy, fiscal policy, government budgets, everything. You will have to plan everything according to the whims and fancies of international finance capital. China was not doing that. China was not agreeing to that. That's why Trump and various presidents were against China. But they could somehow manage to convince the Western countries and continue. But now in the new era, in the post-WTO period, whether Western countries will allow that kind of freedom to India is a big issue. But we will have to have a regime where we are not going to blindly believe market, because we don't have free market of the type which we used to discuss in textbooks. And yesterday in the other discussion, Veeramani was speaking about around 60-50 supply chains controlled by China. Supply chains are in fact ruling international trade, and they are controlled by huge multinational companies, supply chain governors, and they are being assisted by countries, the big state. And China is helping their small industries, etc., etc. So that's the kind of world that we are entering into, and we will have to deal with all these countries. That doesn't mean that we should run away from international division of labor or international trade. Kerala and India will have to engage the world. We will have to live in the midst of the world. We will have to deal with countries. But then if we think that leaving everything to the market will save us, we will be again living in the world of fools. Instead, there should be collective thought, collective intervention, and aggregation of India's power, which everybody else is doing. What is America doing? US is enjoying their power and they are trying to impose that power on world trade, etc., etc. So we should use the power of the state to resist at least this kind of domination. And if you don't do that, no, we will be probably not reaching our targets. No, we have already taken a lot of. I'm sorry. I thought I should be very brief, but I was taking more time. We'll discuss and then we'll have the executive some time for the executive committee meeting.
Okay, thank you, Professor.
No.
So thank you very much for presenting this. And now we'll have minimum 10 minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
10 minutes for.
First, we'll take some questions from.
Yeah, definitely.
online and then
Definitely.
Professor Murthy
First we will take questions from online participants, then we'll have from this platform. I am. Professor Matthew Kurian has come.
അത് കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ട് ഡാഷിന്റെ ചോദ്യം.
Okay.
First of all, I want to congratulate Kerala Economics Association for taking this relevant and very effective and useful discussion. I personally, as a student of international economics, agree with most of the deliberations presented by Professor Biswajit and all other others. But I want to underline one or 2 points. One, all of your argument about making use of the potential internal market, I fully agree with that. Therefore, we require some sort of economic policy changes in our own country. How far the present power structure in our country would yield to that? Because we know that it was the neoliberal policies were excluded and majority of the Indians could not buy the products which are being produced in India. So that is one of my observations. The second about, as Harilal correctly pointed out, we do require a new multilateral order, even beyond a trade order. Because when we scrutinize the post-Second World War world order, including trade order, we find that it was the United States unilateral imposition because they initially agreed with the ITO, International Trade Organization, then they killed it. Then they themselves brought general agreement on tariffs and trade, and 8 rounds of negotiations were there. And in the 8th round, WTO was formed. But at a particular juncture, they found that all these were not to their interest. So they sabotaged. So my point of view is that as it is the interest of the whole world that we do require a new trade order as well as a new world order. And therefore we can win if we are genuine, we can win other countries in this attempt. That is my point of view. Then I have a simple query to the paper presenters. Trump has been affirming this sort of balance of trade deficit. That is only visible items of trade. So my query is, when we bring visible as well as invisible items of trade, won't American transnational corporations would be hurt? So how Trump is going to legitimize this sort of laws to the transnational corporations, which are they in intellectual property, they are in services, they are in agriculture, all over the world. So how Trump is going to convince this sort of a low potential, maybe a potential loss to the TNCs of US. Again, thank you very much. I have been very, very brief. Thank you very much. Congratulations.
Thank you. But Jyoti, Rajesh.
Yes, next we'll have Rajesh Mani.
Yes, you will get participation certificates.
Thus, the rising US trade deficit driven by increased imports from the peripheral economies such as India, together with Trump's tariff policies in violation of WTO trade systems principle, indicate that globalization-led free trade has benefited developing nations at the aggregate level, contrary to dominant narratives.
Okay, we'll collect more questions. ഓൺലൈനായിട്ട് ആരെങ്കിലും ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ഒരു ചോദ്യം എടുത്തിട്ട് പിന്നെ നമുക്ക് പ്രൊഫസർ മുരളി
Any questions from online participants? Yes, now we will take questions from
yeah,
here.
പ്രൊഫസർ മുരളി.
I have a seek a clarification from Professor Bishopjit, because by discussing the protectionary policy of US from the period of Obama, but when we consider the non-tariff barrier, which I feel that you can trace back to the formation of the WTO itself, I would try to get your comment on that. And the second thing, somebody commented that USA again indirectly making China great again. But my question, the same thing that Nixon did it through Kissinger in 1970s also. So in South Asian policy, America was indirectly doing that, not for the first time. Then another question to Dr. Veeramani, especially when we think about the discussion about labor productivity, your observation is correct, but it should not be confined to industry alone. Because if you look at the history of the discussion of the FTA with New Zealand, Australia, European Union, all these occasions, agriculture stands as a big barrier. But a good share of population in that field. So my question, if we want to increase labor productivity, without investment in agriculture, is it possible? Especially Vaidyanathan has I didn't mean that he mentioned like that. This is my I am seeking your clarification. Because
Dhar made that point.
but Professor Vaidyanathan several times argued that after the WTO investment, public investment in agriculture is coming down. There, I think your argument, the increased state role is very important. I would like to get your comments on these observations. Thank you.
Yes, yes. Yes, questions and comments from students. Okay.
So, my question is that actually, what is the reason, the solid reason behind this kind of an aggressive stand of the US? Whether do you visualize a huge setback to the hegemony of the US? Or do you see that the deficit is a major problem, which the US wants to address it immediately? What is your analysis on this? Why they have resorted to such a drastic position? This is my concern.
Ritik.
Uh, Thank you, sir. Vishwadit sir was talking about Trump's intention is to take away the jobs actually, but in the last week, Trump dismissed or sacked the labor statistics officer, saying that in the statistics of the June labor counts are less than May's. And we all, while we are reading on international trade kind of literature, we all heard of this concept called unequal exchange of labor and resources. The global capitalist system cannot survive without this reserve army of labor and the exploitation of labor in the global south. So whether this move, like even in this tariff regime also, we can see the exemptions to Brazil and China in certain kind of things. So is that a measure to take away jobs, or it's kind of a like a mask to divert the contradictions of neoliberalism which is facing in US, and also like the discontent which is rising in the white working class in the US? So is that a mask or a trick like anti-migration strategies which Trump follows? And again, one kind of thing, Veeramani Sir's presentation, the tariffs are based on some, we can see that tariffs are based on some kind of a ratio of trade, right? So can we call it as a reciprocal trade? Because like when we talk about this concept of reciprocal trade, it's not to match the tariff which is in the developing nations. It's actually a ratio of trade. So can we call it like that? That's my second question. And the third one is, Veeramani sir is talking about the bargaining power using the share of the exports. So whether these exports from Vietnam or China can be produced in China, if so, only we can say that the America has a bargaining power over there, and the so-called concept of comparative advantage kind of thing. And
Be clear.
Clear.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whether it should be can be produced in China or US.
Whether it can be produced in America,
But you put in China.
Oh, okay, sorry. That is the question. And whether we can say the growth of China is only because of its export, or is that export led? Because only 20% of the Chinese GDP is on export. It's my understanding. I don't know whether that's correct or not. And India also having a 20% of the GDP. So that means China has a huge domestic market also, and the wage rates in China or in South Korea are not very low. The productivity is high without compromising the wages. So we need a high wage regime in India, and the domestic markets has to be there to survive Indian goods. That's my.
Will you be brief? Yes. Yes.
Some parallels with the current reduction in the tax regime. So instead of tariff reforms, we are going to have a tax reform. So how do you relate to that?
Especially GST and other things.
Or question.
Okay.
Organizers should not ask questions, but meaning the impact on the to process that is likely to be different for different states, right? Okay, so one, what could be the potential? Because given with regard to the state of Kerala, we have a kind of very not non-diversified kind of one. So how would be the impact on specifically on Kerala, and on probably different states in because of this kind of current if international policy changes.
Yes. Yes, one more question from online. Wait. ഒറ്റ ക്വസ്റ്റൻ ഉണ്ട് രാജേഷ് മാണി വന്നല്ലേ അതെ അത് രാജേഷ് മാണിയുടെ ക്വസ്റ്റൻ മാത്രമേ ഉള്ളൂ.
India has been re-engaging with China to counter the US recently. India also has a trade deficit with China, which has been controversial for the last few years. So can India see a viable option in trade with China to counter this problem?
Yes.
My question is, okay. My question is about the value chain. I am loud. Okay. So I'm asking is that we have been trying to move through value chain to counter the tariff related issues or the trade. India has been trying to improve its position in global value chain through PLA scheme and make since the Make in India, we have been trying to move up through the value chain, but we have been constrained by a lot of problems. So how can we address these structural issues to increase our share in global value chain to have more bargaining power in trade related issues?
Okay, then Professor, that we can respond.
Address the questions that were directly asked of me. Of course, this question about US's um, uh, invisible trade account and what could happen to the multinationals. So the interesting thing, of course, I've not looked at the whole thing very carefully, but one thing is happening there as well, because the the trade surplus that the US has been registering on its invisible on the services account has actually been coming down quite considerably. And so now the US has actually a double whammy, and so its current account deficit is really soaring. In the past a few years, in fact, less than a decade, its trade since Trump's first term, its current account deficit as a GDP has gone up from about 2% now to 4%. And if this continues, so that is an issue which will have to be also looked at, because with India and US has a sort of a balanced thing. There is a trade balance. We don't have surplus is almost balanced, and therefore I think that the next attack is also going to be coming on the services side, because I think what Trump has figured out that his services account is also going to be leaking very soon, and it is going to be quite a problem. So if you look at the services, the major accounts, and the reason I'm saying is this that there is one particular component in which US has a significant advantage till now, which is charges on account of intellectual property. Yeah, that's so technology, its leadership in technology is saving it from really collapsing. And that's why Trump, and of course earlier regimes as well as earlier presidencies as well, we saw so China coming up as a technological power. And if you look at the Western narrative as well, so they're always trying to tell us that China is not doing as well as is being talked about. And my view is, and I'm looking at all the ways in which China is developing, is catching up on technology. And so if that goes for a toss, then US is in real big trouble. On the question of NTBs, you're absolutely right, because see, the on the NTBs issues has been with the GATT since the 60s, yeah, at least in the 60s. In fact, there was a working group on NTBs that was constituted to handle this issue, because tariff, everyone saw the way forward, but NTBs, of course, proliferated. And finally, in the WTO, now we don't call most of these barriers as NTBs. We are not, many of them have been legitimized. They're now non-tariff measures. So all these sanitary, phytosanitary, and technical barriers and others. Yeah. Although most of them are actually trade barriers. One of my students has just done a PhD where actually we have actually analyzed all these the impact, the trade impact of these of the sanitary, and these are trade barriers. These are not trade measures in the sense that they can't be called WTO legal. No, agricultural productivity was something that, I didn't have the time to actually wrap up. I went too much into this details of what Trump was doing. Without improving agricultural productivity, we are nowhere. Even the trade-offs that Virovan is talking about, US has capacity in providing substantial supply capabilities in agriculture alone today. Yeah, it's a leading exporter of most of the major agricultural commodities, cereals and all, which is what we cannot take. Yeah, and that's where we are getting stuck. So if we could do a deal like the UK is not an agricultural powerhouse, so this deal would have been done. Yeah, because the template is there, the UK or the EU template. We are not getting stuck because of tariffs. There are other issues other than tariffs which are holding this back. On tariffs, we have a very clear template now. If just to pick the UK, India, because we have liberalized, even in automobiles, when your area on automobiles, huh? No, wines, but automobiles was, the auto industry was extremely organized. They refused to let the tariffs go down. But they have been brought to the negotiating table and that has happened. So industrial sector is not an issue at all. And so if government of India can find some way of getting rid of the farmers organizations, then this deal will be done tomorrow. They're worried about the political implications of the farmers agitation. So it will be done tomorrow. And agricultural productivity, of course, we can't live without with trade agreement or without. We can't live in a situation where almost 50% of our workforce or more are in this kind of a situation, and agriculture is in crisis. So just to get out of that, and of course, state action is the only way forward. There is no other way. This is there are enormous market failures here. Private sector will never come and invest in agriculture substantially. They will only do what Adani is doing, trying to take as much of surplus as they can. Because the reasons for US aggression is that, I've seen this whole trajectory from the establishment of the WTO. When the US, the other advanced countries, they tightened the noose on the developing countries. Now, all those concessions I just talked about on special and differential treatment, those started getting squeezed when the WTO came in. Like we had this balance of payments exemption. We said that we have a balance of payments problem, so we will have non-tariff barriers. Yeah, so that we had to give up when we joined the WTO. So many such things have changed because I think the US and the other countries realized that we had too much of problem with another Japan coming in. Our hegemony is being threatened. The Western hegemony is threatened by Japan and another Korea coming in there. Yeah. So we have to, so on intellectual property and all other things, they started actually clamping down. So that was the first aggression we saw in the 80s, because before that, of course, this whole bunch of developing countries, including India, we are talking about a new international economic order, which and regime change and all that. So that happened. Now, the big mistake that US did was to allow China into the WTO. And when we used to oppose WTO after it was formed, many of our friends on the who were supportive of the WTO, they said, you are talking about all the pains that we are having in the WTO. Look at China. China wants to join the WTO. Since 1986, China had put in its application to rejoin the GATT. It had left GATT in 1949. And you are saying India, and a lot of radical organizations said we should leave WTO. What is this? China knew that it had worked out its trajectory, dominating the global economy, and it needed a sort of predictable set of rules which it could use to then establish itself. So US put all kinds of, the normal trade relations, all these requirements and all that, they put all kinds of barriers. But the mere fact that they could not prevent China from coming in, and in that process, developing countries played a big role. Like for instance, Murasali Maran didn't ask any conditions of China. Just said we'll allow China to come in. So they couldn't prevent, and that was the time when China started growing, and U.S. aggression. Sort of soon after they realized from 2008 the trade deficit had gone up, and then they started doing that. But one thing that China did at that time, and which is also I think is very important for us, Professor Veeramani almost dismissed the internal market. I won't do that because China then started building its internal market. Because China got a very clear message at that time from the Americans and others saying that, you start decoupling. You can't romp around in the global market the way you have. So you you change your ways. And China did start doing that. So the investments in Western China started thereafter. And China's internal market started expanding, and no one knows how far it will go because we don't have any transparency about what China is doing. And I'm sure China's internal market is going to really, go a great, go a long distance. On the labor market, of course, there is a double speak there. See, look at the exemptions that have been given, under this reciprocal tariff, which is number one, mobile phones. Yeah. Why? Because India and other countries, all these production centers have come up. Now, if suppose Apple starts producing in the US, you know how much iPhone or iPhone is going to cost. Of course, Trump doesn't want that to happen. What is the second product where exception has been given? Pharmaceuticals. Again, this is, cheap generics are coming from countries like India. So those and one thing that Trump is very worried about is high prices of medicines. So he's actually he's been talking to the companies that you somehow bring down the prices of medicine. So he can't be doing something to increase the price of medicine. So that has helped us. It's actually helping us because mobile phones are about 12% of our exports. And both these two together are about 25% of our exports to US. And that is entirely happening because there have been relocation of production facilities here. On an impact on Kerala, I think, I've always wondered. So Kerala, it was just before the session, I was telling also Veeramani that I've always wondered that, look, one of the big problems that we have analyzed in trade is the transactions cost. That, the logistics and all is not developed and everything, and internal transport costs are so high. These automobile companies, Maruti and Hyundai, they were helped by Japanese investment of, the Delhi-Mumbai industrial corridor, because Japanese realized that if we have to export, and they're exporting these small cars, we have to invest in infrastructure. The government of India was never going to do that. Yeah. And so this was happening. Honda invested in the Chennai port on all that. Now, here you are sitting next to a major natural harbor. Yeah. And it's very surprising that, you are so way below in terms of your, trade engagements, exports. Yeah. So this should have been a natural destination for investments in and export-oriented businesses. It doesn't happen. So here, and I was actually looking at this thing for different states, looking at the Kerala data. Yeah, one, of course, the advantage is you don't have too much of trade exposure. or to the US also, it's not too much. So that way, it's not going to be hit that badly, I think. But the second thing is that if you have to really take advantage of global dynamics, then you really have to invest in trade, um, and and surely you can't actually ignore this. Value chains and India-China relations, we'll have to wait and watch how it pans out. One of the things could happen is that what Viramani was suggesting in RCEP, and I was also thinking about it, that RCEP could become could become the new engagement for India. And of course, we are so exposed to China, we don't have much to lose. But then we have to do the things that are required to beef up the domestic economy, surely.
Yeah, I try to be quick. So first about this question about the trade deficit, about visible and invisible. Professor there already mentioned about the invisible part. But even within the visibles, there is a major issue. Like, the trade data that Trump and everybody is using has a serious problem in measuring deficit correctly. Why I'm saying is because we know that almost 2/3 of global trade is actually happening through global value chains. So when it is happening through global value chains, what is happening is the different parts and components are manufactured in various countries of the world. So value addition is happening in different countries. And then they are crossing borders of different countries multiple times. Each time a particular component is crossing, that is registered in the official statistics, customs statistics, that's trade flows. Now, what is happening is that this exaggerates, the actual trade flows. So countries like China, Mexico and all, which are actually assembly hub, their trade deficit gets exaggerated with the US, because China used to be the assembly hub for a long period. Now only it is started changing that. But then what happens is that products are coming to China from various countries, and then the final product is exported from the Chinese port, which is recorded as import from China, but it is not actually import from China. It's a Japanese import, product gone to Korea, then some value addition happened, then it comes to China, and then finally it is exported to US. So that is why conceptually there is a big problem in using official trade statistics collected by customs as a basis for this, because it is measured not in value added terms. These statistics is not measured in value added terms, it is measured in gross terms, which is there is a problem of double counting and multiple counting. So what people have done is that they have estimated trade in value added. OECD has those estimates. So if you use a trade in value added terms, then what happens is the recorded trade deficit of US with China actually reduces by almost half. 50% of the trade deficit disappears, because then you attribute that trade deficit with other countries from where the product actually originated. So that is the right way of looking at it, but nobody is looking at it, right? In this, and Trump has obviously not looked at it. So that is a problem there. And then about this question about labor productivity, definitely I didn't mean that China's position on that is clear, because they know that, like for example, when China export iPhone from China, what is the domestic value added in China? It is earlier period, it was just 4%. The remaining 50% of the value added was generated in the US itself. A significant portion generated in Korea, then Taiwan, Japan, all these countries. So the products are all coming from there and then getting exported. So then in official trade statistics, it will be reported as that much $1 billion of, electronics or iPhone was exported from China, which is not true. It is only a small portion of that is actually domestic value added in China. That's the problem. Yeah. So I'll complete it. Just one few things about, one is this reciprocal. There was a question that whatever Professor there answered, I will not go into that. Whether it is actually reciprocal means it has to be tariff reciprocal. Actually, what Trump did is not tariff reciprocal. If you look at the data, it is the ratio only. Not exactly the ratio which I shown, something else which is there. But then that is why in the initial reciprocal tariff rate, when it was announced, India got a good deal. Because the reciprocal tariff rate imposed on India was much lower than that imposed on Vietnam. That is because India had less trade deficit. So even though India has higher tariff vis-a-vis, when you compare with Vietnam. Yeah, so that's it. And finally, I thought that, I'll just mention about this India-China thing. Like, there was a question that with China also we have a huge trade deficit, which always comes as a problem of contention, like, in India-China relationship. So now how to deal with that when we are engaging with China more? So I think conceptually there is no basis in looking at a trade deficit in a bilateral sense. It's a wrong, flawed approach. We need to worry about a balance of payment at the aggregate sense. If the individual countries, how much trade surplus or deficit that we run, policy makers, politicians, always look at it, but that has no logic at all. You have to look at what we look at. We look at current account deficit, which is an aggregate figure. It is not bilateral. So we don't have to worry too much about it, that thing, but politicians they will worry. But then important thing is that, China anyway accounts for a very significant share of global value chains, supply chains. And if we are part of that, if we want to ever get into global value chain, China has to be part of it. Keeping China out, we can't enter into global value chain. From that perspective, it is very important to have, closer ties with China in the current context. Yeah, that's
1 second. See, in the annual conference of the KEA, we had 3 presentations on global political and economic reset. One by Professor C.P. Chandrasekhar, Bhadrakumar, and Professor Rajashree. And today, in fact, now we are continuing that discussion on global political and economic reset. In fact, now the current batch of students and present generation of teachers, they are coming across such a situation where all the rules are getting reset. International relations are changing. The strategic relations are changing, and then the world economy, it's getting reset. So we will have more discussions. Today we didn't have enough time. In fact, no, we couldn't really make use of our guests. Professor Dhar and Veeramani could have been given more questions. In fact, I was tempted to ask many questions because Professor Dhar, in fact, flagged some issues, but didn't really expand on it. Like, see, he was saying that if America is having a trade surplus, if America is trying to have a trade surplus, then it will have a monetary implications. Like dollar will have a problem. So you cannot have both. You cannot be supplier of international liquidity and dominate the world of money and at the same time have trade surplus. So there are such contradictions which are reflections of deeper contradictions of the capitalist system and all. So he was hinting at some of those things, but was not really explaining. But no, we don't have time. Now we are going to have the executive committee just now, but Godwin will make the announcements also.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you, friends. We are coming to the close of this particular session. Actually, Kerala Economic Association, a couple of years back, when we were, relaunching all our efforts, we wanted, we set a goal as, every student, passing out of any institution from this particular state will have some kind of a basic endowment, with them. So actually all the efforts, that we have taken after that are actually in reflection of, that kind of a goal in realizing. So we focused on 3 dimensions, Kerala Economic Association. One is on the teaching, enhancing the teaching, learning process in this particular state, especially in the field of economics. So we actually started our curriculum, meaning reforms, discussion in the inaugural segment. Then we also focus, substantially on the research component. Actually, the Kerala Economic Association's Institute, where Professor Harikurup is the proposed director of that particular institution. We actually have that kind of a vision, and it is for strengthening that, we organize a series of workshops with regard to different tools, whether on econometrics and other kind of softwares and other dealing with different dimensions. The third one is on policy. So we organize a series of policy related discussions, including recently we had a discussion on the stock market and the foreign institutional investment, the capital flight, all those issues. So it's actually part of a vision, and much of the credit goes to the way Professor Harilal actually has, designed it. So I must thank breaking all the protocols, Professor Harilal, for, initiating many of it, and of course the colleagues for the inputs. So let me move to the kind of, assignment, that is bestowed upon me. Also, let me also say that, since I'm a marketeer in this particular association, I would request all my members who have joined online as well as here to be part of Kerala Economic Association by being a student member and life member of, Kerala Economic Association. For this, regarding today's session, we actually had more than 267 registrations yesterday, and much of you have actually joined online, and we had quite a sizable number here. So we must, this is actually the excitement of, meaning all of us at the committee, as well as, the responsibility, as well as, the fear that we have, because there's a huge responsibility on us. A lot of people are looking at us to, strengthen all that particular dimension, and definitely we'll try as much as possible to live up to your expectations. That's the, and we moved from, because looking at this particular crowd itself, you would find that in the initial days of all programs, we used to have, much of, the participation from the GIFT community, but now we have actually diversified to more to other institutions. That's actually the way we actually initially visualized. So thank you so much, all my friends and, GIFT for, helping in that particular one. So we'll, the assignment on me, basically the vote of thanks dimension comes now. So thank you, Professor S. Harikumar, who has been, helping us, in the particular, in shaping this particular functions of association, and also for shaping this effectively the discussion. So thank you from my side. And regarding Professor Dhar, I think I don't need to explain much of it, because he is a student of our dear Professor Prabhat Patnaik, and he had his education from Jawaharlal Nehru University. And as a citizen, I must thank you for, because he was representing this particular country at different international, not only at WTO and all other kinds of international organizations. And he was giving inputs to the government of India and other agencies on shaping, and all the diplomats used to be with him in shaping the views, etc. So thank you as a citizen of this particular country, as well as in that particular dimension as a and also for taking the trouble of traveling to south to reach this particular destination. And Professor Veeramani has been always with KEA, as was already indicated by my colleague. So last month we had a workshop at CDS, and always with us, Professor Veeramani. So thank you so much. We can't thank you enough. And especially to Professor Harilal, which I indicated. And I should also thank Professor KJ Joseph in his absence, because he has been supporting us, quite, his magnanimity is beyond words. So thank you, Professor KJ and his team in his absence here. And also Professor, our Dr. Dear Sharif, who has actually taken over as the registrar of GIFT very recently, but he has shown a lot of enthusiasm and support for all the activities. So thank you, Dr. Sharif for this one. And my other friends at KEA, dear Dr. Nirmal, Dr. Kiran, Dr. Anita Kumari, and my, because Professor Harilal suggests many things and leaves to my colleague Dr. Sandosh and me for the execution part. So we have been working in tandem. So thank you, my dear Santosh Varghese, for all the troubles that you are taking for us. And all the, because all the universities in the state are represented here. Kerala University, we have, Dr. Christabel, the head of the department, and all other universities from MG University, from Calicut, from Kannur University, and all the other research institutions, and all my friends and young students, my vice president of KEA, all of them are here. So once again, and the media and all the technical staff of GIFT, Abhilash and other team here. So thank you, the entire team GIFT, who have been, so enormous in their support to all of us. If I missed, accept my apologies. And with this, we come to the conclusion of this particular session that would be announced by Professor Harikumar. And we'll immediately move to lunch for the other participants, and the executive committee will continue in the same hall. And I would request the rest of the members to move to the mess for the canteen for the lunch. Thank you.